The Red Chamber, by Edogawa Ranpo. The 7 gentlemen, all seekers of macabre thrills, including myself, had gathered as usual on that memorable evening in the Red Chamber. We sank into the deep armchairs covered with scarlet velvet, and everyone, holding their breath, waited eagerly for the next blood-curdling tale to begin. The room was appointed in perfect keeping with the spirit of our gatherings. In the center stood a massive round table, also covered with a scarlet velvet tablecloth. Upon it rose an antique, richly carved bronze candelabrum, in which 3 large candles burned, their flames flickering slightly in the stagnant air. All sides of the room, even over the doors and windows, were concealed by heavy silk portieres that hung in graceful folds down to the very floor. In the mysterious semi-darkness, our shadows, silhouetted against the deep crimson silk, dark as venous blood, seemed implausibly huge. They swayed in unison with the candle flames creeping and writhing within the fanciful folds like giant insects. In this chamber, I always felt as though I were in the womb of some unknown monster. I could even hear the heavy, measured heartbeat, a tempo appropriate to the very might of the beast. No one was in a hurry to be the first to break the silence. The faint flame of the candles illuminated the faces of my companions. The black crimson patches of shadow distorted them beyond recognition, and their familiar features were so frozen, so motionless, that I shuddered. At last, Mr. T, whom we had chosen as the narrator for the evening, cleared his throat. Mr. T had only recently been admitted to our society. He straightened in his armchair and began to speak, fixing his gaze upon the dancing light of the candle. His face was dappled with shadows and, seemingly because of this, resembled a skull stripped of flesh and skin. His lower jaw jerked up and down with a sort of dismal monotony at every sound he uttered, giving Mr. T the appearance of a gruesome marionette. "Personally, I consider myself completely sane," said Mr. T, "and indeed no one has ever doubted the clarity of my mind. However, I leave that for you to judge. Perhaps I am indeed not in my right mind, or at the very least, suffering from a nervous disorder. Be that as it may, I must confess that the very fact of human existence has always filled me with an unaccountable loathing. God, how tedious this thing called life is. In my youth, I entertained myself as best I could, surrendering to ordinary human passions. But alas, nothing could dispel my melancholy. On the contrary, it became increasingly joyless and tedious. Was there really nothing interesting left in the world for me? This thought tormented me incessantly, and so the whole world became distasteful to me. I was simply dying of spleen. Hearing of something new and unusual, instead of plunging into the unknown headlong, I would begin to calculate and measure, to ponder and doubt, and came to the sorrowful conclusion that everything in the world is petty and dreary. For a while I lived like that, doing nothing, only eating and sleeping and cursing my lot. Such an existence is truly more horrible than death, although in the eyes of others I was probably a lucky man. Indeed, it would have been better if I had to earn my daily bread by the sweat of my brow, for even the hardest labor is pure happiness compared to idleness. Though it would have been even better to possess boundless wealth and live in luxury, sating the hunger of the soul with bloody amusements, like the tyrants who became famous. But those, of course, are utterly unattainable dreams. Yes, my life was meaningless and dreary. You, gentlemen, are of course entitled to reproach me. What is so unusual about this? We ourselves are pining from boredom. That is why we have gathered here in the Red Chamber, hoping to distract ourselves. Why lengthy explanations? Everything is clear as it is. Yes, you are absolutely right. I will not waste words in vain and will proceed to the main point. Gentlemen, my torments were far more agonizing than yours. If you are still occupied by such trifles as playing detective, spiritualism, or erotic pictures, then you are fortunate indeed. Believe me, prisons, lunatic asylums, anatomical theaters, these are all just as absurd and tedious as everything else. Personally, I am not even enticed by the spectacle of an execution, which, as I have heard, you secretly dream of. Such banalities have always repulsed me, and I was on the brink of despair when a brilliant idea suddenly struck me, as monstrous as it was alluring. Unexpectedly, I discovered a means to conquer my boredom, and this thought took complete possession of my being. You may shudder to hear my confession. In short, I conceived of a murder. Yes, a real, genuine murder. And here is the brilliant result. On my account are nearly 100 lives of innocent people, women, children, the elderly. I killed them all just like that, for the sake of diversion. You likely think that I repent for the monstrous atrocities I have committed? Far from it. I have not experienced, nor do I experience, the slightest pangs of conscience. I will say more. Lately, even this amusement has grown stale. I have become addicted to opium, out of the temptation to now destroy myself. True, even for someone like me, life is dear, and I find the strength within to fight this foul habit. Yet, if one is weary of taking the lives of others, what else remains but to kill oneself? That is why I decided to reveal my secret. While I am still capable of setting forth the circumstances of the case, I decided that you, gentlemen, are better suited for this purpose than any others. As you now understand, I joined your society only to tell you the story of my strange life. Fortunately, according to your statutes, a newcomer must recount some terrifying tale on their very first evening. So, thank God my wish shall be fulfilled this very night. And so, it all began 3 years ago. As I have already mentioned, I was leading a completely idle life then, devoid of any meaning. Spring had already arrived, but the true warmth was not yet felt. It was, I believe, the end of February, or perhaps the beginning of March. And one day, a most curious incident occurred, one that overturned my entire life. That evening, I had stayed late at a friend's house and was returning home after midnight, quite well oiled. It was cold and damp, but having decided to walk, I did not take a taxi and wandered along at my leisure. Home was already within arm's reach when, turning into an alley, I came face to face with a stranger. He was breathing heavily, his face expressing a state of panic-stricken confusion. The man braked sharply and stared at me blankly. For a few seconds, he silently studied my face, illuminated by the dim light of the street lamps, then blurted out, "Is there a doctor nearby?" It turned out that while driving, he had struck an old man, apparently a vagrant. The injuries were serious. Looking around, I did indeed see a car some distance away, and beside it a body sprawled on the pavement. The victim was groaning feebly. The police station was quite far, and the wounded man was fading before our eyes, so the driver decided to find a doctor first. I lived nearby and knew the area like the back of my hand, so I answered without hesitation. "Go to the left. 2 blocks from here is a house with a red lamp, but the doctor is likely asleep. You'll have to knock on the door." A few moments later, the driver and his partner were already carrying the wounded man toward the house of Dr. M. I watched them until their figures dissolved into the darkness. Deciding that my further involvement was entirely unnecessary, I went home. I am a bachelor and live alone. Tucking myself into the bed carefully prepared by my housekeeper, I fell asleep immediately. Apparently, the spirits had not yet cleared from my head. That was essentially everything that happened that evening. Nothing out of the ordinary. However, waking up the next morning and recalling the night's events, I suddenly realized that I had committed a monstrous error. I had sent the driver the wrong way. This thought threw me into bewilderment. The night before I had been tipsy, of course, but not so much as to lose my ability to think. And yet, I had directed the driver to Dr. M. "Go to the left. 2 blocks. The house with the red lamp." I heard my own voice. Why, oh why did I say that, when right nearby, only to the right, is the house of a surgeon from Clinic K? Dr. M is a charlatan with a foul reputation. He is likely not even versed in surgery. But the doctor from Clinic K is a professional, and he surely has everything necessary for such cases. I knew this perfectly well. Why did I make such a mistake? Becoming anxious, I sent my housekeeper to the neighbors, and it turned out that the victim had died right on Dr. M's examination table. Such injuries are no simple task even for a professional, and M is an undertrained novice. Besides, he took far too long to open the door despite the urgency. It was, after all, long past midnight. While he dithered, the time was lost. And yet if M had immediately and honestly said he knew nothing of such matters, and sent the patient to the surgeon from Clinic K, perhaps the man could have been saved. In the neighborhood, they gossiped that M had completely lost his head and didn't even know how to approach the patient. Hearing all this, I fell into thought. Who, in the end, killed the unfortunate old man? Of course, both the driver and Dr. M bore a certain share of the guilt. That cannot be denied. From a legal standpoint, the driver is most to blame, and yet, the primary culprit is me. The driver only wounded, but did not yet kill the old man. As for Dr. M, he could only be blamed for a lack of skill and medical knowledge. Does that mean the murderer is me? After all, it was I who made the fatal blunder that led to death. And then a strange thought crept into my mind. What if I had made this mistake intentionally? Yes, then I would of course have become a true murderer. But before the law, I was clean. No one could accuse me. I wasn't even acquainted with the deceased. I could easily brush aside any suspicion. I simply forgot about the surgeon from Clinic K. Who could prove? Gentlemen, have you ever happened to reflect on the motives behind this or that murder? After that incident, I suddenly realized how unsafe the world around us truly is. Who can predict when, or on what path, you will encounter a person who, like myself, will direct you to the wrong doctor? Let me illustrate my thought with a concrete example. Imagine this scene. An elderly woman, newly arrived from the countryside, is attempting to cross a busy city street. Cars roar past her, bicycles chime, carts rattle, and rickshaws scurry. In short, the poor rustic's head is spinning. At the very moment she sets foot upon the streetcar tracks, an electric train hurtles toward her like a whirlwind. If the woman notices nothing and steps quickly ahead, no harm will be done. But should someone shout, "Hey, look out!" she will lose her nerve and begin to falter, uncertain whether to proceed or turn back. And if the motorman cannot brake in time, it is that very word, "look out," that will be her undoing. I once sent a country bumpkin to the grave in just such a way, but more on that later. Here Mr. T fell silent, his lips twisted into a sinister sneer. Yes, in the case described, I am undoubtedly the murderer. But who would ever think to suspect me of malicious intent? From any angle, my actions can only be interpreted as a manifestation of the most humane feelings. Even the victim likely yielded up the ghost, if not with gratitude on her lips, then at least without hatred in her heart. In short, this proved to be the safest and most perfect method of murder. Most people believe that the law will inevitably overtake and punish the villain. Fools take comfort in such certainty. Only a few realize how many murderers manage to escape retribution. As is evident from the two examples I have cited, there exist countless ways to kill with complete impunity. This discovery filled me with indescribable delight, and I offered thanks for the generosity of the Creator, who bestowed such possibilities upon me. I was literally maddened with joy. For now, I could kill as much as I pleased without consequence, even in our enlightened age. A worthy amusement. Even Sherlock Holmes would have been baffled by me. What a magnificent awakening from my slumber. During the following 3 years, having surrendered myself entirely to this new hobby, I forgot all about boredom. I vowed to myself that I would not stop until I brought the tally to 100, just like the celebrated warriors of the Middle Ages. And so, 3 months ago, the number of my victims reached 99. Only one final death remained when I felt a familiar disappointment and exhaustion. I had grown bored of being a killer. To be sure, it had been quite entertaining. But I felt no hatred for my victims. I was simply amusing myself, inventing new ways to kill. I never repeated myself. Every time I stood over a cold corpse, I was already contemplating the next crime. I felt something akin to inspiration. Unfortunately, I cannot abuse your time, gentlemen. A detailed account of all my crimes would be far too tedious, and therefore I shall present you with only a few of the most curious examples. My first victim was a blind masseur who lived nearby. Like many people with disabilities, he was remarkably stubborn and always did everything out of spite. His favorite saying was, "Don't take me for a fool. I'm blind, but I can get along without your advice." One day, I noticed him on a very busy street. The blind man was wandering toward me. That self-satisfied blockhead was marching right down the middle of the roadway, his cane slung over his shoulder, carelessly humming a tune to himself. Just the day before, Work had begun on the city's sewers in that district, and the workers had dug a massive trench across the street. Since the blind masseur could not see the danger sign, he continued to stride heedlessly toward the pit. And then, I was struck by a brilliant idea. Calling him by name, we were acquainted as I frequently made use of his services, I suddenly cried out in my most playful tone, "Hey, there's a pit! Move to the left, further to the left!" As I had anticipated, the masseur suspected it was yet another joke, and, true to his nature, did exactly the opposite. He did not turn left, but continued to march stubbornly forward. "You must be joking," he muttered, suddenly veering even further to the right. A few steps later, with a muffled cry, he plummeted down. Feigning the liveliest concern, I ran to the edge of the pit. I was burning with curiosity. Had my plan succeeded? It was more than I could have dreamed of. The blind man lay there, crumpled in an unnatural position. Apparently, he had struck his head against a sharp stone lining the bottom of the trench, for dark blood was oozing from a wound on his scalp. Streams of blood also flowed from his mouth and nose. It seemed the poor devil had bitten off his tongue in the fall. His face had already begun to take on a bluish, earthy hue. He didn't even have the strength to groan. He suffered for another 2 or 3 hours before yielding up the ghost. My plan had worked perfectly. Anyone would have said that I wished the poor man only well, that I had tried to warn him of the looming danger. How could anyone detect malice in my actions? How captivating this pastime proved to be. The inspiration that possessed me was akin to the ecstasy of a great painter, and the sight of blood-stained victims writhing in agony, never even suspecting that their murderer stood over them, afforded me a sharp, keen pleasure. Let me tell you of another no less entertaining case. It was summer. Together with a friend, whom I had marked as my next victim, I set off for the seaside to swim and sunbathe. I harbored no ill will toward him. On the contrary, he had been my bosom friend for many years. It was simply that, for no reason at all, I was seized by an irresistible urge to kill him. The fishing village where we stayed was the most godforsaken place in those parts. There wasn't even a halfway decent beach. Only a few copper-tanned children splashed near the shore, and 2 or 3 youths, students from the city by the look of them, wandered the coast with sketchbooks in hand. In short, the place was quite dismal. You wouldn't see any glamorous beauties here as you would at a fashionable resort. The inn was no better than the lowest Tokyo flophouse, and the food was simply inedible, save perhaps for the vegetables and sashimi. My friend, however, unlike myself, was clearly enjoying life. I, meanwhile, waited impatiently for a convenient opportunity to carry out my plan. Several days passed. So I suggested we go for a swim some distance from the village. There, the shore fell away steeply into the sea. "An absolutely ideal spot for diving," I exclaimed, being the first to toss off my clothes. My friend was also eager for a dip and briskly followed my example. Standing on the edge of the precipice, I raised my arms above my head and, loudly commanding 1, 2, 3, I dove headfirst into the water. However, the moment I touched the surface, I arched my body sharply, changing the angle of entry and submerging only a few shaku, scarcely a meter deep. I have swum like a fish since childhood, and I had even managed to rehearse this tricky dive several times before breakfast. Popping up, I wiped the water from my face and called out to my friend, "Hey, come on in! It's deep here!" Suspecting no foul play, he nodded, raised his arms, and dove, sending up a cloud of spray. The seconds ticked by, but he did not resurface. I expected nothing else. You see, in that very spot, a jagged rock rose from the seabed, completely invisible from the surface. It was this accidental discovery that had given birth to my sinister plan. Everything went exactly as I had intended. He struck his head against the rock. You likely know that a skilled diver never enters the water vertically in an unfamiliar place. I successfully handled the difficult task, but my friend was a novice at such things, and he paid the price. After a while, his body finally drifted to the surface like a dead fish. He was unconscious. I dragged him onto the sand and ran to the village. Some fishermen were resting on the shore there. They had just hauled in their nets and were having a smoke. They readily agreed to help, But when we arrived back at the scene, it was clear that nothing could save my friend. There was a gaping wound in his head, through which the white of his brain was visible. The sand all around was soaked with crimson blood. In all my life, I have been interrogated by the police only twice, and that was the first time. It was perfectly natural, as I was the sole witness to the accident. But since everyone knew how close I had been to the deceased, I was released without delay. The officers even expressed their sincere condolences to me. In short, if I were to go into detail, there would be no end to these stories. I trust you now understand what a perfect crime is. You could say that all my atrocities bore a similar character. Once, during a circus performance, I caused the death of a tightrope walker by making a most obscene gesture. I am even embarrassed to tell you exactly what kind, while she was balancing on the wire under the big top. The girl noticed it, lost her concentration, fell, and was killed. On another occasion, finding myself by chance at the scene of a fire, I told a frantic woman searching for her child, "He's in there! Can't you hear his cries?" The wretched woman rushed into the flame-engulfed house and was burned to death. Seeing a girl on a bridge clearly intent on settling scores with life, I crept up and shouted loudly right into her ear, "What are you doing? Stop!" It may be that she would have changed her mind, but at that moment, out of fright, she fell into the water and drowned. However, the hour is already late, and you are likely bored with my tales. Bear with me a little longer. I shall soon finish. From the previous stories, you have likely concluded that I always killed only one victim at a time. But that is not so. Otherwise, I would not have managed to put to death 99 people in less than 3 years. The story with which I intend to conclude my narration took place last spring. You likely read in the newspapers then about the wreck on the Central Railway. Quite a few people suffered in that catastrophe. Well, that was engineered by your humble servant. It all turned out absurdly simple, although it took a considerable amount of time to find a section of track suitable for my plan. I marked out that particular line because the terrain there is mountainous, and besides, the Central Railway always enjoyed a foul reputation, so another wreck would not particularly surprise anyone. I settled on a section beyond Station M. It took a week. Near M, there are healing springs, so I established myself in a local inn, pretending I had come to the waters for treatment, and day after day I took the baths. 10 more days passed in vain like that. Finally, I decided it was time to end this performance. After lunch, I set off as usual into the mountains, supposedly for a stroll. Having moved half a rai, 2 kilometers from the inn, I climbed a rock and sat there until dusk fell. At that very spot, the railway made a sharp curve. To the left of the tracks, the cliff fell away, forming a gorge through which a river twisted like a narrow ribbon, barely discernible in the evening haze. There it was, the coveted moment. No one could see me, but still, just in case, I pretended to stumble and kicked a large rock that lay at the very edge. I had long ago noticed it. It was enough to give it a light shove for it to fall precisely onto the tracks. I was lucky. The rock fell exactly as needed, right onto the rails. In half an hour, the express from Tokyo was scheduled to pass through. By then, it would be completely dark. The rock lay behind the curve, so the engineer simply would not have time to notice it. Having verified that everything was calculated correctly, I hurried to Station M. The road went through the mountains, and it was clear that I would arrive no sooner than in half an hour. Bursting into the station master, I blurted out, "Hurry! Disaster!" And in a faltering voice, I told him that I was being treated at the spa, that this evening, while walking in the mountains, I had inadvertently pushed a huge rock onto the rails. Realizing what I had done, I tried to descend to clear the way but could not find the path. I am, after all, a stranger and know the area poorly. And then I raced here to warn you. Do something quickly or it will be too late, I concluded with a look of great concern. The station master turned white. The express from Tokyo has already passed the station. Even now it is approaching that curve. That was exactly what I had counted on. Soon, from a miraculously survived conductor, it became known that the train had derailed. There were dead and wounded. Naturally, that evening I was taken to the station, but I was prepared for the interrogation, and everything went off without a hitch. I was only severely reprimanded. and released. No punishment, aside from a small fine, followed. Thus, gentlemen, with a single stroke, I killed 17 people. Yes, gentlemen, I am a murderer. I have taken the lives of nearly 100 people. But I do not repent. I pine from boredom. I have grown weary even of this, and yet I intend to complete my tally. Now it is my turn to die. I see that such cruelty is not to your liking. Well, you are right. What mortal can compare to me in villainy? But the cause of this is boredom, unbearable boredom, and I want you to understand my feelings. Let judgment be passed. I am ready to hear any sentence. The narration ended. Mr. T fell silent and swept his gaze over us with a mad look in his eyes. No one uttered a word. The faces of those present, illuminated by the sinister crimson flame of the candles, remained absolutely impassive. Unexpectedly, a dazzlingly brilliant spot appeared on the fabric concealing the door. It grew until it transformed into a large silver circle that slowly drifted out from behind the scarlet portiere, like the moon emerging from behind the clouds. I guessed immediately what it was, a tray of drinks in the hands of a waitress, but the eerie atmosphere of the red chamber had strangely transformed the objects. The scene strikingly resembled a vision from Salome, with the severed head of the prophet. It even seemed to me that any moment now, following the slave with the tray, a guard with a halberd would emerge from behind the curtains. However, instead of a thick-lipped, semi-naked slave, an enchanting waitress appeared. Approaching the table, she began to arrange the glasses with effortless grace. The girl seemed a creature from another world, as if a breeze of living life had suddenly burst into a deathly crypt, and I felt a strange unease. Along with her, the sounds from the neighboring restaurant seeped into the red chamber. Music, laughter, and the shrieks of tipsy women. Suddenly, a revolver appeared in Mr. T's hand. "Say goodbye to life," he said in the most matter-of-fact tone, aiming the blackened muzzle at the waitress. Then everything became a blur, the thunder of the shot, our bellows of surprise, and the piercing shriek of the girl. Everyone leapt from their seats. But the waitress was alive and unharmed. She still stood in the same spot, tray in hand, staring ahead in a dazed stupor. Mr. T burst into laughter like a madman. "It's a toy, I fooled you nicely, Hanako." And he laughed hysterically once more. I looked at the revolver in surprise. It appeared completely real. Even a wisp of smoke still curled above the muzzle.
"So that means it's a toy? God, how you frightened me."
Pale to the point of blueness, the waitress slowly approached Mr. T.
"Let me have it. Let me see. It looks just like the real thing."
She timidly took the revolver and turned it before her eyes.
"I want to fire at once, too."
And the girl, bending her left arm, rested the revolver on her elbow.
"Now hold on, it's my turn to frighten you."
"Don't be shy," Mr. T teased her. And then a deafening explosion rang out. Mr. T gave a strange groan, rose slightly, and fell to the floor. A convulsion passed through his body. The joke was taking on a gruesome hue. It all looked far too realistic. We rushed to Mr. T. Someone grabbed the candelabrum from the table and held it close. Mr. T's face twitched as if in a falling sickness, and he himself writhed and coiled like an earthworm severed by a shovel. From the wound darkening on his chest, crimson blood oozed, trickling down his white skin. Alas, the revolver was by no means a toy. We stood frozen in a strange stupor. The nightmare narration had concluded in a fitting manner. It had all happened in a matter of seconds, but to us, it felt as though an eternity had passed. Incredible, I thought. And yet, if one reflects, it is entirely in Mr. T's spirit. He did intend to bring his monstrous tally to 100, choosing the most suitable place for it, our red chamber. And as always, he did it through another's hands. Yes, Mr. T remained true to himself to the end. No court could now bring charges against the waitress, for we 6 were witnesses. The others were likely immersed in the same gloomy reflections. An oppressive silence hung in the room, broken only by the sobs of the waitress lying on the floor. In the ghostly light of the candles, the entire scene appeared utterly unreal. Suddenly, a strange sound mixed with the girl's sobbing, something like a stifled chuckle. I sat up. The hair on my head stood on end from horror. "Well, what is the matter, gentlemen?" The corpse spoke. Struggling with a new fit of laughter, Mr. T could no longer contain himself and burst out openly. "Has it really not dawned on you yet?" The waitress, prostrate on the floor, also stood up, literally exhausted with laughter. We were simply speechless with astonishment. Mr. T held out a small round bag on his palm. "Look, this is the bullet. It's made from a bull's bladder. I filled it with red ink. Upon impact, the casing burst and the ink flowed out. 100% fake. Just as much a fake as all my stories. The performance was a grand success. You were pining with boredom, and I wanted to entertain you. I am glad I succeeded." Mr. T fell silent, and the waitress, his accomplice who had been playing along the whole time, suddenly flicked the wall switch. A dazzlingly bright electric light flared up, snatching our bewildered faces and the fantastic decor of the room out of the gloom. Suddenly, as if a magician had snatched away a magic cloak, I saw all the ugliness and falsity of our surroundings. Those scarlet portieres, the carpet, the velvet chairs, the silver candelabrum, all that pretension to significance. They looked shabby and pathetic, and not even a hint of mystery remained in our red chamber.